This study session will come to order. And Dr. Tedford, would you please lead us in the pledge?
My pleasure. Please rise. Put your right hand over your heart. Ready, begin.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Dr. Brady, this is a study session on our school budget and finance, and you have the floor.
Thank you, and excuse my voice, I'm a little bit under the weather today. I would like to begin our meeting today with getting some foundational knowledge, which is important and sets the stage for some of the discussions for this evening. And I would like to introduce at this time Ron Bennett and also Matt Phillips from School Services, and they are going to give us an overview and a brief presentation on where we are today.
Excuse me, we have to see if there's public comment. We have to see if there's public comment.
This is not, this,
Yes, we do.
you know, this isn't even it's not a meeting that was at 72 hours. All right, oh, I see there, all right, well, public comment.
Okay, so whether you have it on the agenda or not, you're able to, you are required to do it, you're able to do it.
You're fine.
Okay, and so with your lawyer sitting right here, we didn't want to violate.
Thank you.
Anyone? Okay, so shall we begin?
Well, I have a request.
Okay.
Bill Bradbury?
I could speak now, but if there's time later, I'd rather wait or what have you.
Would you like to wait until the session is over?
As long as there's still people here.
As long as we're like the bonus there.
Okay.
The people here now, if you wish to speak.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
Here you go. Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Members of the board and community, I'm Bill Bradbury, the instrumental music teacher and chairman of the Performing Arts Department of the high school. I know this is the second of a similar meeting in regards to study session and budget. And what I had found out is that instrumental music teachers, specifically in the middle school level, that was one thing considered, or at least discussed last week, as far as cuts and potentially using that to reach the district's academic or financial ends. I just wanted to give a couple comments at this point, and this is my 22nd year in this district. When I started, I was a traveling music teacher, instrumental music teacher, both at BV and Horseman, and there was another gentleman who serviced the other two schools as well. Where we're at now, there's been such progress made over this time to develop these instrumental music programs that it really would be a step back to cut anything at this point. At this point, if we're able to offer a robust both orchestra and strings program and at two different levels, the beginning and advanced. If we, let's say half the amount of employees that we have, essentially one of those disciplines you're cutting out, because there's no way two people can service 4 schools and keep all those programs going. Just secondly, just kind of thinking about this, we will have or would have begun with several students at each site to incite their interest and desire in music education. And a step simply, you're just cutting that, would be cutting that off. A lot of parents have made an investment. They buy their instruments, rent the students' instruments. They will have no longer that opportunity to continue with this district. And then finally, I know there's a few years back, this was being discussed, and there was the option of, well, what if there was one position removed and we do it with 3, it's still, there's something, it's not equitable across all 4 schools. There's some problems. The second thing, speaking as a high school teacher, what it means here is we're going to reduce the strength of an already robust performing arts department here. I know many of you have seen our groups perform. It will obviously lessen the numbers, obviously lessen opportunities for students to pursue this interest in subject. And the students that do come here, depending upon what part of the program is phased out, they're not going to have the same instruction and understanding equal to their peers either here or in other schools at this level. You know, if you think of it, most of our music students they're dedicated, very dedicated. They're academically dedicated, and they're musically dedicated. Just a little factoid, students with 3 or more years of education, music education, whether vocal or instrumental, have percentage-wise perform better on standardized tests. This is very interesting, it's something to keep in mind. Also to throw in, and this is unique to our district, I believe we had 4 National Merit Scholars here. 3 of those 4 National Merit Scholars were in instrumental music programs here at the high school. One last thing, we have, as I speak, we have 2 students, and to me it's, as far as I know, we have 2 students that audition and are in part of the all-state California honor bands. And they're rehearsing up in San Jose. They have a performance this weekend. But to my knowledge, we've never had any students participate in the California State Honor Band, which is says something. And both those students also were enjoyed 3 years of instrumental music training here in this district. So, you know, to wrap it up, the idea here is I hope we can kind of reflect and maybe redouble our efforts to think about where those decisions might be made. No one wants to have anything reduced, obviously, but if there's anything else, if we could remove that out of the discussion, I think would be best in every way. But I wanted to just convey those ideas, and hopefully we'll have some other parents here with us today. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Bradley. Simone Gold.
Thank you. Right on cue, I'm a parent from BV, and you know, I have been to several of these meetings, so I'm not discounting the fact that there really is a $5 million budget shortfall. And most of you, I think I've seen at some of the concerts. It's just fantastic. The music department is fantastic. It just seems, you shouldn't cut from a fantastic program. I remember when my younger son started at BV, Mr. Fuhrer just became principal that year, and when he came and spoke and introduced himself to all the parents and we're talking about the various electives, he said, you know, I really want to encourage you to do band, because we find that all of our children that are in band and music, they never have any discipline problems. That's an exact quote. You know, my teacher in particular, Ms. Valens, everybody knows how exceptional she is, but also we participated with the Horace Mann program, and he was fantastic. I don't know you personally, but I've seen some of the high school plays, fantastic. I just have to say that, not that you should take my word for it, but that you should investigate it for yourself. It's fantastic. So I hope that, as our professor said, we can find something else to cut.
Thank you so much. Anybody else wish to speak? All right, sir, you have the floor.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. I'm Ron Bennett from School Services of California. I have been in business since 1974, our 43rd year, and we serve the business side of schools. So we do the budgets, we do some collective bargaining, we do a lot of lobbying and legislation, we do these kinds of budget reviews. When we do these, our goal is simply to give you an independent look at the work that's been done within your district and either validate it or make suggestions for how things need to be modified in order for them to provide a good framework of timely, relevant information for the board to make decisions. So we did that work. We've prepared a short PowerPoint that describes that work. We'd like to go through that and then take questions. I'd like to introduce Matt Phillips. He's one of our bright young CPAs who is part on this report. Kathleen Spencer is also listed and did a lot of the work. However, she announced last week that she is pregnant, and she wishes to focus on that for a while instead of your report. And so Matt and I will deliver the report. Matt?
Wonderful, thank you, Ron. And just a side note, before we came down here, she was not pregnant. So, that's why Ron and I are down here now. All right, thank you for the introduction. Good afternoon, President Spitz, board members, Superintendent Brady, and members of the audience. Thank you for the introduction, Ron. As Ron mentioned, we did some work for the district looking at really 3 key areas. The first 2 areas are related to the financial state of the district right now, looking at some of the factors that are contributing to the financial state of the district. And those include the language that is currently included in the collective bargaining agreement, and then also looking at the configurations of the schools. And so the way that we split this up is into 3 different areas. The third part that we looked at is the reserves of the district. We're going to talk about it a little bit, but the Beverly Hills is different in a good way than a lot of districts around the state, and that your funding model looks a little bit different. So we're going to spend some time talking about those reserves. So when we came down, we can do a lot of stuff via data. I'm a numbers guy, I'm an accountant. I think you can learn a lot from numbers and looking at patterns and trends and whatnot. But as I grow wiser, I learned that you can learn a lot from interviews as well, from speaking with people, but the numbers don't always tell the entire tale. So when we do studies like this, we like to come down and interview folks throughout the organization, from board members to staff members. We even had the opportunity to meet with Principal Dave Jackson, I believe, and had a conversation with some parents in a classroom. So we really tried to get a full gamut of input as we looked specifically at the school configuration of the K-8 model. So let's start off with the salary formula. We do a lot of work with a lot of districts around the state. We see a lot of salary formulas that are out there. Does that mean I'm done?
Just a scroll down.
Okay, all right. I flash back to my days in high school, and I'm like, all right, we're done. So we started with the salary formula, taking a look at that. And we were looking at it really from the lens of, does this look similar to formulas that we see across the state? Are there differences in this formula that we see? And are there differences that, that we could maybe provide some recommendations on based on best practices that we see across the state? So real quick background on the formula. The way that it's written in the contract, it says that essentially 55 cents of every new dollar goes to salaries. Okay? And then there's some factors that go into that, but that's kind of the broad strokes of it. When we looked at it, we said, okay, that seems reasonable. But once we started peeling back the layers of the onion a little bit, we noticed some things that we didn't see in other districts around the state. So when we typically see a formula, and we write the language for the formula, or assist in writing language for the formula, when we do allocate on what's based a fair share model, right? It's kind of what we're going for here. We want to make sure that we capture all of the costs for any particular unit when we include that formula. And so as we looked through the contract and we looked at the language that was in there, it appeared to us that there was some items that were not included in the total unit cost when we do this calculation. So for instance, I've highlighted a few of the things here, but it's very reliant on prior year information to give a current year rates. Okay, so when you use the prior year information, if there's no changes from one year to the next, that's fantastic. You can use the prior year. But there are some things that occur in school districts that are unique to school districts that are going to change salaries from one year to the next. Some of those things include step and column. Right? Some of those things also include if we are bringing in new staff, right? If we're starting some new programs. I know that Beverly Hills hasn't had growth in quite a while, but if we were ever to the point where we're growing in enrollment and we want to bring some new staff in, we wouldn't be including that. If we increase our health and welfare cap, that's not included in the formula. And then one of the revelations we had about 4 years ago was the governor gave us the gift of pension reform, right? Increasing pension costs. And so the way that the formula is currently written, because it relies on the prior year information to give the current year raise, to calculate the current year raise, The increases for PERS and STIRS are not included in that number either. The other piece that we saw is that the formula dictates that if property taxes are increasing, that we then run the calculation through and figure out what the raise would be. But the formula doesn't address if property taxes are stagnant or if they decrease. There wouldn't be any relief provided to the district if that were to happen. Okay, so that's a little bit on the formula. Is there any questions on that, or I can keep going through the school configuration component?
I'm not sure that you're correct about if the property taxes are stagnant. My understanding is that is part of the formula, that if property taxes are stagnant, that there is no then raise that goes along with that.
Before we do that, I just want to be sure that Mr. President, we are willing to take questions any way you like, but we want you to decide how you want the questions handled so that we come forward with that.
What is normal is that questions come from board members or staff and not the audience during your presentation. People in the audience, if when at the end of our session, you'll be welcomed to express yourselves to the board.
And we're happy to answer questions, but again, we don't want to change your normal procedure.
Understood.
Thank you.
Can we clarify that point? Because I think it's
Sure.
an important point. Please.
Yes, so if you have a zero increase in property taxes, we're going to take a number of 0 multiplied times a percentage, which comes back to a 0. So there would be no increase. So it is addressed, but if there was a decline, there wouldn't be a relief, so a negative number. All right, so moving on. School configuration now. So when we looked at the salary formula and we looked at the school configuration, it was through the lens of, the district is in a situation right now where it's facing some financial woes. And so when we talk about the school configuration, it's important to look at kind of the historical lens of it. That this has been around for quite some time now, since the 1920s, if my research on the websites serves me correctly. And so when we look at this, the K-8 model, there's definitely a lot of benefits that come from the K-8 model, but there's also some consequences of the K-8 model, specifically through a financial lens. So some of the areas we looked at with the K-8 model is the cost of the current offerings that we have in Beverly Hills. We have some very rich programs. Sounds like we have a wonderful music program that's doing great things with our students, so that's fantastic. We looked at the levels of the courses that were offered. We looked at the footprint of the schools, right? That's important. If we're talking about reconfiguring some schools, we would want to make sure that the configuration is something that can handle that. We talked about or interviewed folks about the benefits to students of the K-8 model versus other models, and then also some community input as well. So the financial lens, let's take a minute and talk about that. When we use the district's numbers from the adopted budget for the 16-17 year, I'm going to focus on this bottom number right here. That number in brackets means that the district is spending more than it's receiving every year. Okay? So as we do that, we're going to start using our savings account, essentially. The size of the savings account dictates how long we can keep doing that. As the savings account decreases, we lose the flexibility to make changes to our program, and it becomes we must make changes versus we may make changes to it. Okay. So a couple of things that are contributing to that spending more than we're receiving. One of it is the way that the formula is written in the contract right now, because we're using a lot of prior year factors and not including all the changes for the current year. But then another area is that we're not able to staff to the staffing formulas that are in the contract right now. And that's due in large part to the K-8 formula that we have, the K-8 school sites, because we don't have that economy of scale to get all the way up to the numbers that we have in the contract. So the result of that is we have a lot of very small classes, which is great for education, but unfortunately we have a finite number of resources to use to educate our children. So both of those pieces are contributing to the current state. So before we talk about the pros and cons of the K-8 model, we wanted to talk a little bit about budget and budget assumptions. Okay, so when we build the budget, a few slides back, we showed the negative numbers. Well, those negative numbers have a lot of sub-factors that go into it and assumptions. And so one of the assumptions that we looked at over these next 3 slides is the assumption of our growth in property tax. Beverly Hills has been in a fortunate situation where even through the Great Recession, you guys were kind of immune to a lot of the effects that the rest of the state felt, but nonetheless, you were still affected. But what we wanted to do is provide the board with kind of a range to say, you know, the numbers that we use are great numbers, right? There's nothing wrong with the numbers that we're using now, but if we put that in context with a range, what does that look like for Beverly Hills? So based on our current projections, when we get 3.5, almost 3 years out, with our current projections, we have not enough fund balance to meet the state minimum reserves. Okay, that's not a place that we want to be. That's what we're trying to avoid right now. And this is with an assumption of a growth in property taxes of about 5% per year, anywhere from 4 to 5% per year. Okay? If we roll that forward and we think, okay, well, let's bump up that projection to a 7% growth year over year. And this is the historical average. We went back, I think, 6 years to kind of see what the average was for Beverly Hills. And you can see that changing that factor, we now have a reserve of 11%. Now, does anyone know for certain if we're going to get 7% every year? No. If we did, we wouldn't be in school finance. We'd be making a lot of money elsewhere else doing projections. So just the change in an assumption can change the outlook for the district's finances. Okay? And then finally, we did a projection with a 10% growth year over year. This is a very aggressive assumption, in our opinion. Again, we're not saying that one assumption is better than another, but it's things for the board to consider when it's ultimately making the decision. Okay? If we have a 10% year over year growth in our property taxes, our fund balance, it actually it evens out. Our revenues are equaling our expenses each year. Okay, so we can maintain everything that we're doing right now. All right. The other option that we see a lot of folks do, specifically basic aid districts, because you are funded on your property taxes mostly, you don't receive the state aid that a lot of districts receive, is establishing a parcel tax, whereby you would have the community members would approve a parcel tax, and they would contribute X number of dollars to the educational purposes that are outlined in the parcel tax. This would allow you to generate some more revenues for the district, allow you to do some of the things that you want to continue to do, and not make any changes. So we wanted to at least provide the range and some other options on the revenue side for the board to consider. So now we're going to switch gears a little bit and talk about the configuration of the school sites. When we were thinking about this and we were going through our analysis and looking at data, and also with our interviews, the current model is 4 K-8s with the 912 high school. And so in the back of our minds, we were considering, well, what about 3 K-5s and a 6-8, or 2 K-8s? Okay? These are just the ideas we're floating around. There's not a silver bullet per se, so we wanted to show the board what that looks like as far as the pros and cons. Okay? Because there's going to be pros and cons to any of it, to keeping the current model, to switching to a different model. Okay, so some of the pros of what we currently have right now, no changes. Right? We have our small class sizes, smaller class sizes, smaller than what's illustrated in our collective bargaining agreement. It's very much supported by the community. We had an experience where we got to go into a classroom and speak to some parents, and they were very enthusiastic about the K-8 model. I don't know if some of you were in there. Or, yeah. Thank you, Mr. Jackson. Appreciate that. Folks are very excited about the neighborhood school. They like the K-8 model. They like having the K-8 in their neighborhood. They went to it. Their parents went to it. Their grandparents went to it. Their children are going through it right now. And then folks also echoed that there's an extended age of innocence. And so what that means is that those kiddos who are getting into 6th, 7th, and 8th grade, because they have their peers with them that are younger, they tend to want to be role models for those peers. And so they stay younger longer, right? So if we look at some of the cons associated with that, it's more expensive per student, right? We're going to have more staff to instruct our smaller class sizes, so it's going to cost more per student. We don't have the same economy of scale. We looked at one of the school sites, and in grades 6 through 8, there was 150 students in all 3 of the grades combined. And so when you think about wanting to offer maybe some remedial classes, some core classes, some honors classes, there's just not enough students to fill up all of those classes, even though we want to make sure we provide all those offerings to our students. There's also quite a few traveling employees that go around. Thinking about some of the languages that are out there, they bounce around from site to site, they're itinerant, so that makes it tough for our employees. Okay, so if we flip it now and we think about, well, what are the pros and cons for switching models? Well, you kind of get the opposite, right? Switching to the alternative models that we talked about, you're going to get more of that economy of scale because you're going to have more students in each grade span at a site, right? One central 6-8, you're going to go from 150 students to 800 students. Okay, you're going to be able to offer all of those classes, all those different offerings you want, conceivably even more electives that are out there, more alternative classes for those students and more offerings. It's going to be less expensive because you have the economy of scale, less expensive per student, and fewer traveling employees. Okay, some of the cons with that, a big one that we saw was the facilities, the footprint. Okay? A couple of the KH you have right now, modernization I think has happened at 3 of them, except for Hawthorne, I believe that's correct. The footprints are small, considering if you wanted to put 800 6th through 8 students at one site. You know, that could create some hardships. Okay? Folks would express that they would not be happy because they wouldn't have their neighborhood school. Folks who were at the school that would be converted would be driving their K-5 to the other ones, and folks who were at the other ones would be driving their 6-8 over to wherever the 6-8 school is. And then students mature more quickly. Okay? So if the board were to go down the road of keeping the current model, okay, we need some things to happen. We would need our property taxes to come in higher than currently projected. Okay, if that didn't happen, we'd have to generate some more revenues. If that doesn't happen, neither of those two things happen, we'd have to look at our educational offerings. If we want to keep our current K-8 models, assuming our property taxes come in and projected, because we're unable to sustain our current educational offerings with the current model, everything else being equal. Okay. Obviously, consolidating electives, consolidating classes, it's going to create some bigger class sizes and create less offerings for our students. Okay, so that's the school configuration component of it. So the first two are kind of related, and then I'm going to talk briefly about the budget reserve. When we talk about a budget reserve, this is our safety net. Okay, this is money that we have that allows us to sustain our programs when there's negative things that affect us financially. Right? It allows us to dip into our savings account so that we don't have to disrupt the programs for our students. An important factor with this is that you guys are a basic aid district, which I've mentioned a couple times, which means you're funded on property taxes. The state has basically said you get more in property taxes than 90% of districts across the state. So if you have a little snafu here and there, you're on your own. Okay? So this reserve protects us from those snafus, those fluctuations in our property taxes. Okay? There's been some talk about changing state laws around Prop 13, property tax collections. So far, we've been good at holding that off, right? That's a benefit to us. But you never know what the state's going to do. Every few years, it seems to kind of rear its ugly head, and then it goes away, and then it comes back, and then it goes away. So that's another reason to have a reserve. Now, the state's minimum that's required is 3%. Okay? There's a lot of smart people in this room. I don't think any of us think that the 3% reserve, either personally or for a school district, is enough in case of shortfalls. So we're going to provide a couple options here for what we see as kind of a best practice across the state. We run a coalition. It's SF Squared. It's Schools for Sound Finance. And it's comprised of about 90% of the basic aid districts across the state. So it's about 90 districts. And so the policies that we see floated around, the reserve balances that we see floated around, are significantly higher than the 3%. Okay? If you think about a regular school district that has protections, so 900 school districts, they usually keep about 14% set aside in case of a rainy day. But because we don't have that protection, and you'll see it illustrated on the bottom of the slide here, on average, basic aid districts had about 25% reserves set aside because they don't have the same protections that regular school districts have. Okay. So here's a snapshot of what the district's reserves look like right now. So our last closed year, we had 25, almost 26% reserve. That's a healthy reserve, right? That's nothing to be ashamed of. That's a good, solid, healthy reserve, right around the average of the state for basic aid districts. But that reserve is dwindling based on current projections, and we talked about some of those factors that are feeding into the current projections right now. Okay? As we extend that out, it's going to continue to go down further because the revenues are exceeding the expenses. Okay, so when we think about potentially creating a policy for Beverly Hills, we like to break it down into really 3 levels. Because there's going to be some years where maybe we're going to drop down because we did something big. planned spending, but we always want to have that goal of where we want to get back up to. So with school services, we believe that at a minimum for a basic aid, we should have a policy of 10%. Okay, anything less than that is really, you're flirting with danger when you get below the 10% as a basic aid district. Okay? Setting up the second level, second tier if you will, if we can get up to the 17%, that's a good next rung in the ladder. And that 17% comes from the GFOA, the Governmental Financial Officers Association. It's a tongue twister, mix that up sometimes. And what that represents is 2 months of expenditures. Okay? 17%. 3% is 9 days of payroll, just to kind of put it in perspective. Okay? And then the third level is at 25%, so that's the average of basic aid districts across the state. So you would kind of be in the same boat as many of your brethren. Okay? We want to set this reserve policy. These are kind of benchmarks, but we want to set a reserve policy locally if we go down that road as something that's sustainable for us, that gives us, an auditing speak, that gives us the warm fuzzy feeling that if we're at that number, we know that we'll be able to sustain our programs. We'll be able to sustain any shortfalls that may happen for a year or two without disrupting our programs for our students. All right, so that concludes the brief presentation. Mr. Spitz, President Spitz, I'll turn it over to you for us.
Thank you. Colleagues, any questions? Okay, thank you very much. Superintendent Brady?
Thank you. Thank you for being here.
Our pleasure.
So at this point, we're going to go into our presentation for this evening. So I'll give them a second to put that up on the screen.
Why is it not? There we go. Okay. Just on mirroring.
Stand in front of the thing.
Can you click on the first slide too? Do you know the
No, I can't because you're in front of it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for your presentation. It really does dovetail nicely into an updated presentation from the cabinet to the board with our main goal of achieving long-term financial stability for the school district. It's important that we always start out with our mission statement, and it's something that you've heard today from a parent and also from our teaching staff, the importance of a rigorous education for our kids, and these statements in good times and in bad times are what drive us. This is a living and breathing document and mission statement, and it really needs to come to play, especially in some of the tough financial times that we are experiencing right now. So our current situation, as you know, as school services pointed out, that our projections over time are putting us on a unsustainable financial path. You heard as well that we have a high number of staff for the number of students that we have in the school district, and coming into the school district with 7 years of experience being a superintendent, I can tell you that you've done a terrific job in making reductions over the years. I know that there are many people that are working very hard. It's a lean staff, and so I've noticed a lot of the things that I would have recommended right away for you to cut that have already been cut. And so that is certainly a concern when you come in and those things aren't just jumping out at you to cut right away, because you've done a really good job as a school district. But as you can see through the projections and the work that school services has done and our presentation from last week, that we are at a tipping point as far as our future and looking at how we deliver education and the number of students we have and the current financial projections.
And so this is just a graphical representation of things that we've talked about. On school services, they did their presentation based upon our adopted budget. Right now, we haven't presented to you with the second interim budget, but at first interim, we see the continued pattern of deficit spending, where our expenditures outpace our revenues on par with almost $5 million, which is where we are right now, where we were in the at the beginning of first interim. Why I put in a $5 million balancer in 17-18 for us to continue with a financially solvent budget. It's a bit more when we do second interim. You'll see it's a budget. It's going to change. I don't think that it'll go that much down, but it will go up a little bit. We have tweaks in salaries. We have tweaks in reclasses, extra fifths of positions, temporary teachers, changes in revenue. Right now, we don't have any idea. We don't have any indication that we're getting any more additional taxes. In the end of March, I'll come to you with second interim, but the picture is not going to change significantly from here. You're going to be within that $2 to $5 million range of deficit spending every year. That gets us into the where we are right now. This is the slide you saw last week, but I wanted to say that if you look at without any reductions, we have 1 year before we get to that point of 17% reserves that Matt talked about, and we don't want to get there. I mean, we want to give ourselves some time, but right now we're at about 20% reserves. We ended the year at 25, and now we're at 20. So we're definitely eroding where we are.
Ms. Carter, can you go back to the slide that was just something? I'm sorry to interrupt you, but I think this is really important that we have so many people that are engaged. If you can just talk a little bit about how one might look at this and think that it's just $4 million and that in essence this is compounding each year. So
Yes.
can you talk a little bit about that?
Well, it's compounding because if you go, I'll go forward to the next slide. As you can see, every year we dip into the actual reserves because we don't have enough revenue to sustain our spending habits. So we start dipping into, right now our reserves are at $10.7 million, $10.1 million. But you can see we start dipping, and this is just as a first interim. I would imagine if we didn't do anything, in 17-18 we would start dipping into that $10.1 million in order to balance by first interim of 17-18. And so if you didn't do anything, as you can see by, what year is that? By 19-20, within 2 years, 3 years, we would be having to restore our 3% every year, which we wouldn't live on 3%. And as a basic aid, 17% is as close to the edge of the fire as I think we would want to get. We have to remember that though we're basic aid and we're property taxed, it's not Beverly Hills property tax that we get our revenue on. We get our revenue based upon LA County. So what's going on in Lancaster and Palmdale and Downey and Bellflower averages out in how we get our percentage. So we talk to school services about our revenue projections. We're right now assuming an AV out at 5%. Until we hear that the housing market is truly cooled. And when it cools, it'll hurt us because we'll go down to a 4% or a 3% assessed valuation in terms of how we increase that revenue. Right now we're at 5% and we feel comfortable with that, but we don't, as of yet, feel comfortable going higher. If we come in at 6%, again next year, we might go up to 6% in the following year. But again, it's a crystal ball of where we set our revenues.
Mr. Carter?
Yes, sir.
If I may, can we go back to the prior, that one? I just want to ask you this. and this was mentioned at our meeting last week, the board has authorized a pretty aggressive technology program in which the board authorized about $6 million in capital expenditures for equipment and infrastructure and so forth. And part of that program involves about $2.5 million of operating expenditures in 2017-18 and 2018-19, the two coming years. But the board has not authorized those expenditures as yet, but they will have to be authorized. And they are not included here.
No. Your technology expenses
But
are not included.
they're not included.
Your goal for beefing up your deferred maintenance program is not included
Right.
in here. Some of the other goals that you've talked about, we're talking about status quo.
And yet we can't ignore those.
No.
So I suppose we will be taking those up as we go forward.
Yes.
Thank you.
And so, our current budget and the multi-year projections have led to the board's charge. Right? Again, just a review from our last study session, we were charged with reducing annual spending up to $5 million beginning next year. This requires us to analyze our current and future financial projections, and to explore program reductions to meet the target budget.
And so this is a slide that we showed last week, and it's great to see some new faces actually at this meeting. It's really important that we engage as many people, not just staff, but also our students and also community members about school finance, about some of our challenges, and really begin to educate people, because school finance is not easy to understand. And then you take that and then you have to apply it to running a school district. And so we are very happy that you're here tonight, and looking forward to providing more education throughout the community about where we are. As we had said yesterday, or last week, the idea behind it, engaging and educating people, is kind of bringing people along. And so we have an overarching theme that we believe that some cuts are going to be feasible for next year, but we'd really like to engage our public into a process and work with our associations and also our community before we execute a long-term plan. It's one of the reasons why I had Ms. Kirk-Carter go back to that slide. That's a daunting slide when you look at in the next 4 or 5 years in $20 million. You're not going to get there by just eliminating a part-time position here or one full-time position here. These are systemic type changes that I believe need a lot of discussion and some serious discovery.
And so we're presenting you with multiple scenarios, and all of them really require the review, the process, the community engagement that Dr. Breggy spoke of. And so we're going to present several scenarios, the first of which, scenario number 1, is to make no cuts, to maintain the status quo. But we do believe that any of our scenarios require that process. And so I believe Dr. Breggy will be speaking more about that.
Thank you. So scenario 2 is very much what we presented last week. It is reductions are based on declining enrollment. As you know, enrollment may increase and decrease, so these are subject to changes. Layoffs are projected in English, social studies, and PE. And when we do that, we always lose quality teachers as we're going about those processes. We also know that some teachers will have to travel between 2 schools. at the K-8s because of the master schedule flexibility. And this is all based on the availability of a traveling teacher. Scenario 3 is the same kinds of similarities that I gave you last week. We could reduce some high school classified positions that we're still looking into. We could reduce our tech teachers by half for some savings. We have included then again our enrollment reductions that we had from scenario 2. And then we could reduce our intervention teachers by 50%. Again, decisions are made regarding which intervention program should be cut, but the data right now does not support that we can make a good overall decision based on effectiveness. If we look at scenario 4, we basically kept the same cuts that we had in 2 and 3, but we've also added a high school counselor. And so if we look at the high school counseling position, we have fewer counselors may result in losing our momentum or our gains in college and career readiness. And so each one of these cuts adds another layer to the scenarios. If we go to scenario 5, then we've added a little bit more now. We've added 2 high school counselors, or pardon me, 2 counselors. We continue with our high school classified positions that we have talked about in the past. We've still at 4 tech STEM teachers in the middle school. We've got the enrollment cuts that we talked about in the previous scenarios. We've got the interventions that we've cut in the previous scenarios. We've added GATE for a half-time $80,000. And then we talk about an increase to TK3 class size to 29. That has complications because we're in negotiations. We have an MOU through December of next year. Requires some board policy changes. We could do middle school instrumental music cut for $200,000, and then we could also do classified library techs, which would also require some analysis of contract language as we move forward.
So what Matt mentioned in the presentation earlier is really relevant in terms of enrollment and staffing. And anyone who has done a master schedule in this district understands the challenges that we face, particularly at the K-8 schedule, because we have teachers who are teaching in both the elementary and in the middle school, the traveling teachers that were mentioned. We have other constraints, including teachers' minutes, the needs of the district, curricular offerings, schedules of other staff who travel, part-time staff, and so on. And so we wanted to try to paint the picture of what this challenge looks like for us with several examples. And so we provided an example of middle school English language arts and math. So in middle school, we offer multiple courses. We offer regular in a grade level, we offer honors, we offer intervention. And so when you have declining enrollment and you also offer multiple sections, it becomes very difficult to staff at contract. It becomes very difficult to fill classes. And so what school services Matt mentioned earlier is in fact the case. The K-8 model and our declining enrollment and the multiple offerings that we have in middle school English language arts and math makes it very difficult for us to fill classes. Music has been brought up. Music is another area, as well as other electives. You know, this idea of part-time teachers, the statewide teacher shortage. It would be very difficult to hire a part-time music teacher and travel. We've seen that model before. Mr. Bradbury lived it and spoke of it. And so the district's desire to provide a robust arts program, music and other arts disciplines, has resulted in having classes that are sometimes low in enrollment because of our configuration. And so what that looks like and I just took a snapshot of the master schedule. I sorted it by total number of students from lowest to highest, and on the left you'll see the high school, and you'll see some of the classes that are very low. So we have some of the arts classes, we have a number of other foreign language classes, we have a number of classes that are singletons, or what we call doubles or singletons, in which we may only offer 1 or 2 sections of a class at the high school. So if you have AP Chemistry and you only have 2 sections, and you have 65 students, right, you're gonna offer 2 periods, but where do you put those sections? Those are high-achieving kids who want to do everything, and the constraints of the master schedule often result in a very uneven master schedule, especially considering the fact in the last 6 years, we have really reduced over 500 students at the high school. So there are a number of challenges with scheduling at the high school. You know, if you want to have a robust theater program, you have to have a theater teacher. Well, we have only 1 theater teacher, but some of those classes are quite low. Same with music, and so on. On the K-8 side, we spoke about some of the sections, the multiple courses within a grade level. We do try to maximize and be efficient. We have 1 French teacher for the K-8s. She's a miracle worker. She travels to all 4 schools and teaches a section of French at each school. It's amazing that we have held on to her. 1 instrumental teacher at each site. Again, it results in low enrollment.
So last week at our meeting, the board had some great questions about other areas of a school operation. We do have an extensive agreement with the city, it's a JPA agreement, and the board had asked us to look into some of the cost analysis, just a cost benefit to find out what that is, and is that productive and working for us. And those are really good ideas to do that. We should take a look at that and look at some of that language. That just is going to take some time to be able to do that, but we definitely want to dive into that. Academies were brought up, and Dr. Tedford and I got really excited about that because that is exactly where we should be going. But we need some time to look into how that fits into our vision. We know it does. How does it? And we need to spend some time looking at making sure that we do that and build that in a meaningful and thoughtful way. Special education has been brought up several times. And this is an area that we've had some consultants in that we need to bring in a leader and actually look at the programs that we are delivering. But this is also an area that we know that we can reduce some of our costs. They're just not hard costs right now. It's really tough to be able to identify what that looks like. And as far as athletics, it's like music. And it's like our core offerings. They're all important. And so we do want to look at the program analysis to look to see that it's beneficial, that our students are getting what they need out of it, and that we're running our programs with high integrity.
And so, as we talk about a process, we talked a little bit about this last week. As you can see, the way we're even doing this budget presentation is different. This is very welcome to your business manager, that your entire cabinet, our entire leadership team is embracing our challenge, and we're coming up with, we hope to come up with solutions together. Before, it was the administration makes the recommendation and the board takes action. No one is included in the process. Their voice doesn't get heard. We would like the time in the upcoming year to do the bottom-up process, to have committee members help us develop options. The broader community offers feedback, administration recommendation to the board, and the board takes action. One of the things that Dr. Breggy keeps talking about is figuring out what are the community's stalwarts. What are the things that won't pass for any of us, that we just can't look at unless we bring in additional revenue or something like that. And we really need to get that community, what are their top 2s, what are their top 5, where do we need to go? And we really are asking for the time to do a really good process, because again, it's just like with a diet. The problem didn't happen overnight, and it's not going to get fixed overnight. You know, and luckily we do have some time to with some small reductions here, to do it the right way and to really look at the areas that are that will be long-lasting, sustaining cuts. So, is that?
Yeah. So just to end with the last slide, which is just continuing the conversation. And I want to make it clear too that last week we spoke to you from a very global perspective about cuts in the district. And when we put scenarios together, that wasn't necessarily to box the board into any one decision. It was to start taking a very complex challenge and starting to break it down a little bit. And so that's why we put it the way that we did, so it doesn't need to be discussed in a manner that this is not an all or nothing approach. This is not, there are trade-offs in everything. We see a lot of benefit from this type of scenario, but today, in this conversation that we are going to have today is really about trying to find out what can we get to. As I said earlier, and I kind of want to end with this before our discussion with the board starts, is I've been in situations as a superintendent where we've needed to shave $1 million or $2 million off the budget. And you know, we trim those areas and we find out what they are. The concern that I have is looking at the long-term projections. We're going to put ourselves in a really difficult spot if we are sitting here a year from now and starting to cherry pick at certain things. And it would be really beneficial to find out more about what the community values, what models are sustainable, because we're getting to a point, and I said a tipping point, of trade-offs. You know, can we continue to move forward with the model that we have, or are we going to be placing ourselves in a situation where we are going to be dismantling a very comprehensive and robust educational program for our district? So that's why we put it in scenarios. We're looking forward to the conversation with you. We know that there are some future considerations, and if you could just advance that. And I use the word drivers because I feel like, again, it's just, no, it's one more, sorry. Two more.
Other way.
One more. There we go.
Oh, sorry.
So it's just understanding what those drivers are. Again, they're not short-term, these aren't short-term fixes. And so the discussion today really needs to center around and give us some direction on the finances, how much we're going to cut, the educational programming, and whether there can be additional community support. And really, there's a big conversation about rate of change as well. I've had a lot of experiences where that rate of change has been too fast without having that education piece. So we're welcome to have that conversation as well. There's a timeline coming up as far as reduction in staff, if that is the direction that we're going. We're happy to flip back to any slides if you would like to refer to something. But really, the discussion and the continuing conversation starts with what type of cuts and the implementation of cuts would you like to start to see for the 17-18 school year?
Thank you, Dr. Griffin. Mr. Schwartz, have you any questions or comments?
Sure. Well, thank you to everyone that put together a presentation and presented today. I suppose I'll start with the discussion on instrumental music. So just a personal anecdote. I'm not in any of the high school instrumental programs right now because I do not have time in my schedule to fit band or orchestra, but I am in the jazz band with Mr. Bradbury, and I was in choir in middle school. So just an anecdote, when I realized last night that I had a board meeting today and that it was at 3 o'clock, not 5 o'clock, I was quite upset that I would not be able to go to jazz band. So I emailed Mr. Bradbury, and he told me that there would not actually be jazz band today, as is quite obvious because he's it's right here. And then when I told my friend, or my friends this morning, on the way to first period, my friend was quite livid that there was no jazz band because this was going to be the highlight of his week. But I think that really goes for everyone that is in an instrumental program, at the high school or in middle school or anywhere in the district. These are the kids that really care about what they're doing, and they come to school and they love playing music. They love being involved in these programs, and they do it because they love it. And I think that if we as a district stop caring about them, what reason do they have to keep caring themselves? And I think that instrumental music is really a program that we shouldn't cut at all, because it's what distinguishes our district from other districts. Instrumental music, theater arts, just performing arts in general really make this school and this district what it is. So first and foremost, I want to start with that. A couple other things that I had some questions or comments on were the intervention or the proposal. I know that we're just looking at all the possibilities right now, but to me, the intervention program, or cutting the intervention program and increasing the TK to 3 class size to 29, those two stick out to me a little bit more than the others, particularly because if we as a district, we're trying to give kids like a head start in this district and really prepare them for everything in the future. And having these ginormous class sizes and also getting rid of the intervention programs that we just established in order to ensure that these kids have adequate foundations for their future. That's like twofold going at the foundation of our kids' education. And I think that has ramifications as for what happens in the future of those kids' education down the line. And I don't think that's a good way to, or a good place to cut, especially at the beginning of their education or educational career. One more thing that I want to address maybe was the cutting 2 counselors at the high school. I know that counselors are pretty much swamped all the time, especially we used to have 4 counselors, I think, a few years ago.
We used to have one at each, like K8.
Yeah. But cutting 2 counselors would be cutting a house from the high school, which is that's that's a lot. And I've sometimes had to wait 2 hours to see my counselor, and cutting a third of them would not help that. And they really are useful. I go to my counselor all the time. She has, she has guided me throughout high school, and I think having more counselors is better in almost every scenario, as long as we can afford that. But I think what I'm getting at with all these or at least the ones that I mentioned, and pretty much all of it in general, is what differentiates us as a district compared to LUSD or the private schools that we're competing with. If we take away these programs like instrumental music or intervention or these small class sizes, what's left? Why would a family have an incentive to come into this district, pay the high rent, or buy a very, it's like property values are very high in this district. What incentive would those families have to come into this district and send their kids to these schools if we end up being just like LUSD, or even worse, perhaps, after we cut all these programs that make us different? So I think that's something we should consider.
Thank you.
I appreciate your comments, and I just want to interject, President Spitz. I apologize. I don't know how you normally are communicated with for meetings, but before we leave tonight, I want to make sure that I get your number and just don't give it out to anybody. And I'll then just text you, and we'll just communicate that way. Okay.
Mr. Goldstein.
Thank you, President Spitz. Mr. Schwartz, well stated. Yes. Very salient and poignant. Since we have a number of new faces in attendance today, I want to start by quickly recapping my comments from last week's budget session. I discussed 4 big ticket areas of our budget. One is special education. There is a need for a full-time director. Consolidation of services, bringing certain services in-house, and better vetting of non-public school options can be readily implemented this coming year in order to reduce special education expenditures by 15 to 20%. This could save the district $2 to $2.5 million annually. That alone can make up almost half of our projected budget deficit. Salaries, weighing on everybody's mind. The amount of salaries paid is not the issue. We need to work with our labor partners to adjust the salary formula and reduce the number of paychecks. That does not necessarily mean cutting programs. It means finding the efficiencies in those programs. The formatting of our salary formula alone can make up the other half of our projected budget deficits. I strongly encourage both sides to meet and continue to meet in the next few weeks to capture all employee compensation within the formula that was discussed in the presentation. Benefits. In an uncertain national healthcare environment, an increase to health benefits would assist our labor partners, would also help attract and retain educators. Perhaps both parties should shift the discussion from salaries to health benefits. It was brought up today about teacher shortage in the very near future. The California School Boards Association front story is teacher shortages ahead, survey finds. That impacts our ability to attract and retain. Salaries and benefits become crucial for the livelihood of our students and academic achievement. Staffing levels, an incredibly important topic that has been well documented. We all have to be honest about our staffing levels and recognize that we cannot continue to staff at the same levels when we had 2,500 students attending the high school. In the next 3 years, without new state-of-the-art facilities to attract families, Beverly Hills High School may only have 1,250 students. There's been projections of that. Almost half as many as just 10 years ago. Correct staffing levels will provide annual savings that can be placed in our reserve account and maintain the programs that we are currently running. Those 4 areas provide the greatest opportunities to the district to reduce expenditures and align our budget. The question to ask ourselves is, how do we provide the same educational opportunities to our students, increase wages and benefits for our staff, all without impacting educational opportunities for our students or significantly increasing class sizes? And I appreciate the fact that Dr. Breggy actually, every time he starts a presentation, he refers us back to our mission statement. The board worked very diligently in reformatting and really focusing in on our mission. The mission of the Beverly Hills Unified School District is to inspire and enable each student to achieve academic excellence and meet the goals of college and career readiness. Our stated objective is college and career readiness. So how do we accomplish our district mission at the same time reduce expenditures? The answer is already being implemented in this district. All students will ultimately enter a career regardless of whether the timing of the career begins after post-secondary education or directly after high school. Therefore, it is imperative that career readiness, operationalized as technical and 21st century skills and dispositions, along with college readiness, be supported and developed in all students across all grade levels in this district. That should be our focus. When I was elected to this board a short 3 years ago, I advocated for a career technical education program and a director to run it. I believe Ms. Dubin's here today. I also advocated for a dedicated college counselor. I am pleased that both became a reality in my first year on the board. See, I recognize, and the board agreed, that if we were to compete against high-performing schools, both public and private, it not only required raising our district profile to universities and colleges, but more importantly to our students and their families, so that to realize the vast array of higher educational opportunities available to our children. It's important that we have taken these steps. And yes, that does cost money, but we found a way through CTE to offset the cost. At the high school level, we need to increase the percentage of students who successfully complete approved career technical education pathways aligned with the A through G curriculum as college-ready metrics. The reason our students get into great colleges and the colleges of their choice has to do with both our academic offerings and our career technical education offerings. Make no mistake about it, college admissions officers highly weigh our CTE offerings, our extracurricular, our performing arts, and those CTE courses today are as important to colleges as grades and test scores. Our CTE program includes KBEV, which just took first, second, and third place at recent Skills USA contest, culinary arts, which also took first, second, and third at Skills USA. We have robotics, DECA, virtual enterprise, which all consistently receive state and national awards at competitions. All these programs receive CTE grant funding to offset the cost of running those programs. More importantly, each program incorporates multiple disciplines, including entrepreneurship, business, marketing, that we reach out to our local businesses and for internships and monetary support for our programs. Last year, as the board president, I am pleased that the board committed to fund CTE for the next 6 years. That was an important step in our students' continued success. The key to CTE courses, and the reason I'm talking so much about it, is that they give students exposure to a myriad of professional areas while bringing in grant monies and commercial sponsorships to significantly offset the cost of running those particular programs. The district CTE committee, which I am a member, is working with the district to do the same for courses that we are currently offering and have been offering for decades that would also qualify for future grant sponsorship monies. For example, courses such as photography, architecture, journalism, and so many more could be rolled into the CTE program simply by having those current certificated educators obtain a CTE credential for a mere $85 and a few hours coursework. This is the future of self-funded educational programs. I asked Dr. Breggy, this board, and his staff to continue to work with our labor partners to make this a model, a reality. As for our middle school offerings that a number of the parents here today are here, we can align them in the same manner as CTE. We could consolidate disciplines and programs that are aligned, such as choir and instrumental courses, audio and visual arts, classical arts and digital arts, journalism, photography, and yearbook. At the CTE committee meeting this week, a business partner brought up the idea of specialized academy, a Beverly Hills business school. We already have a medical science academy. The reality is that the students today do not require the entire semester of one discipline. They can readily be exposed to multiple disciplines within one course offering during one semester. This is 21st century learning. These are just a number of options that the district should look at that would significantly reduce expenditures while increasing student exposure to many subjects. Our goal as parents and educators really is to provide exposure to a subject that may ignite a lifelong passion in a young person. As for class sizes, it is no secret that if we staff closer to the contract, we would be in a much better financial condition. That does not mean I advocate for 29-1 or even 26-1 in the K-3s. I do advocate and have advocated for 23-1 in the K-3s, as it is an educationally viable number and still a very low student-to-teacher ratio. We need to correct to appropriate staffing levels in 4th through 8th grade and 9th through 12. An example would be beginning in advanced journalism. When I was in a high school journalism student, both these courses were combined. Currently, they're separate courses. and there are many courses like that throughout the high school, and there's some in the middle schools. One thing on the subject of school configuration, I attended Beverly Vista. My children were educated in this district under the K model. Most parents come to this district for the K model. I'm a proponent of the K model. Changing our school configuration should be the last thing we do, not the first. Finally, there was no real discussion or of increasing revenues. And I know that's something that's very difficult to do, but not impossible. At the previous budget session, Ms. Kirk Carter mentioned that other districts receive revenues from parcel taxes, was in the presentation, and sales taxes. We should explore with the city the feasibility of those revenue streams. Another revenue enhancement, which was touched upon, can be done this year, is an increase in the joint powers agreement. The JPA is a facility lease agreement the city of Beverly Hills has with our school district that also includes allowing the children of the city employees to attend our schools. I have always advocated for a major increase in the JPA. I have always believed that the value of the JPA to the city is worth at least $25 million. The reason is simple. Land is unique, and the city of Beverly Hills has half the recreation and play space as comparable municipalities. I ask that our district JPA representatives, Dr. Breggy, President Spitz, and Vice President Korvikoff, seriously consider my statements with regard to the value of the JPA in their negotiations with the city. According to comments made during the city council candidates debates, the city has $570 million in reserves. A mere $5 million annual increase to the JPA will provide discernible educational stability for thousands of its youngest residents. Finally, with regard to increasing revenues, Dr. Breggy, prior to your arrival, the board had inquired into the feasibility of redeveloping the district offices into residential income-producing property to replace the oil well royalties. The district that would incorporate new district office space and residential development. We are looking to partner with the city or a private developer. It is anticipated that the project could be designed, bid, and built within the next 3 years, and thereafter generate in excess of $3 million annually to the district. I would like to ask that Dr. Breggy and President Spitz follow up on this avenue of revenue stream and bring it back to the board as a study session. I believe that each of the options I have discussed will present viable avenues to reduce expenditures, all without realignment of our school site configurations, and will increase student educational opportunities and will increase revenues. Where there is a community will, there is a way. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Margot.
Thank you, Mr. Goldstein. I want to thank School Services for coming out, enlightening us. I, though, feel like I keep on doing this every year. You guys are a new addition to the process, so that's appreciated, but almost every year we go through this drill. And then we somehow find some more money and we don't make as many cuts as we thought, and everything kind of is rosy for a while, and then it starts souring again and we find ourselves here. I'm not blind to the fact that we do have a serious issue. I still don't know, we won't know what the revenues are from taxes. We have no idea. There's two major question marks Mr. Goldstein brought up is the special ed department. I mean, you claim that we could possibly save in the millions in that if we get a quality department working. That's wonderful. I would love to see that happen. And of course, the salary formula. Now, the salary formula is a timing issue. We're already in the middle of February, and we're going to have to know these things within the next month if we're going to reduce the amount of cuts that we're looking at, especially if they affect employees. So time is of the essence. I really encourage our negotiating teams, our union members, to take this seriously and understand that, at least for me as one board member, I don't have to look at all these cuts if I know that that's adjusted and where it needs to be to secure the finances, as Mr. Goldstein mentioned. So I would like to see that taken seriously and expeditiously as well. To tag on to what Mr. Schwartz said, I would like to take the music off the menu. Okay? We can't keep going through that every year too. Why do I want to take the music off the menu without thinking about it? Here's my reason. The credential for a music teacher and the credential for a chorus teacher are the same. Seniority in this district dictates that when you cut a staff position, it's always last in, first out. It's a seniority. And it's par for the course with most practices. If that were to be invoked into the music program, this district would lose incredible teachers that we are trying to foster a district of amazing teachers. This is the whole point, is to get students in front of terrific educators. You can't talk about being a great district and keep cutting, or even talk about cutting, terrific educators. You got to put them aside and work on the next thing. So as much as I appreciate the options on this, I don't even want to discuss that. So I think Mr. Goldstein had said it about the music. I'm saying it about the music. So so far, there's 2 people not interested in reducing the music program. I was making some notes, and I wanted to ask a question. The intervention reduction by 50%, does that affect the number of students who can qualify or be helped by the intervention program?
Yes, I think it would, because you have an English language arts teacher at each K-8 and a math teacher at each K-8 in the K-5 program servicing students. And we even talked, I believe you asked a good question, how many of those students overlap? Not as many as you might think. And so it could impact the number of students serviced for intervention.
In a cut by 50% model, you're doing traveling between 2 schools intervention program? Is that the idea?
No, we currently have 2 at each site, and so you would have 1 at each site.
Would you cut a subject, or would one teacher do both?
We would have to discuss as a staff and get input from you and then bring it back to you.
Okay. If we had data on the success of the intervention program, it would be an easier decision to even juggle with. Right now, I'm inclined not to want to make any cuts in that, because it could be a very successful program. We're advancing students who need the support. We just don't know. It's a hard thing to opine on. The tech teachers, there's one where it says reduced by 50%, and then there's one where it says for middle school tech STEM reduced, I guess, the other 2.
100%.
So what is the concept? And I was not aware that tech and STEM were bleeding over, I guess, on certain campuses.
They are, in the sense that the middle school tech teachers also go into the elementary
The
classes
elementary
for
STEM. Okay.
That's right.
All right.
And so you would, for the 50% model, you would have 1 teacher who would go to 2 schools, and we would again have to look
For
at.
elementary.
Well, they're currently both middle and elementary. We would have to discuss, again, as a staff, get your input and bring back to you how they would service those schools, because they're currently both, they're K-8.
It would, my thought on that is we're trying to push technology into the classroom. We've moved 2 of our tech teachers into the iCoach position, correct?
One of them was a tech teacher.
One of them was a tech teacher. The other was hired as an iCoach, or was?
The other was an elementary teacher.
Elementary, okay. So I think if that's the direction we're going, I think it's defining itself. I think the pathway is defining itself. But I know there's master scheduling issues in regarding tech, and I've spoken about the pros and cons of the existing tech program. It's outdated, as some people have said, but it also provides a period for students to be programmed into. So that has to be vetted, I think, a little further before I can opine on that. My last question was, with the 1.3 in reduction of enrollment, are the FT, I guess, Yolanda, you might know this, is that all based on current temporary and pro teachers, or are there permanent teachers?
No, these do not include the temporary teachers. The temporary teachers are on a different, they're always released every year. These are because of enrollment figures. And there's a couple that I added in here because of leave of absence, people that are going to return and they needed a spot.
Okay. So once again, that would be something that I would have to look at the seniority and matrix list, because that means something. You know, losing a good teacher means something. So I can't just go ahead and approve those estimates. So it's beautiful on paper because there's no faces attached. But once you start attaching a face to these eliminations, you're like, oh my God, we're going to lose that person now if we do this. So that, at least I'd like to know But that leads me to about liking to know. I'd like to know what the community thinks. I think a lot of powerful things have been said here. Dr. Breggy, you have put it very succinctly. I think that there's 10 items, well 9, if I cut off music. There are 9 items in these 5 scenarios. And I would like those maybe to be ranked in a PACE email out to community members so we can get feedback and we can hear, tell the community, look, this is going to happen, but we would rather it happen with your blessing than not your blessing,
Like a survey?
Rank them 1 to 10. 10 being whatever it is. 1 you want to get rid of it first, you're okay with it. 10, I have a really hard problem getting rid of it. Okay, it would really devastate us if you got rid of this. And that would give us a kind of general feeling. And you'll probably get about maybe 15 to 20% of them that you send out back. But that would be the sample. But this would be our opportunity to be completely transparent with the community, let them know, because there's very knowledgeable people here, and they'll go spread the word the best they can. But a PACE email, because that's the best way we can get to everybody, would be, I think, a great way to just get that quick feedback before we go into the actual decision-making process on here, because we're not doing that today. I would like to know that, so people can think about what we're looking at from our point of view a little closer, those who couldn't be here tonight. And like I said before, I implore that the district and the union can work this out sooner rather than later to avoid a lot of that. So that's really important to know. Thank you, Mr. Spencer.
Thank you.
So I think we're here so that we can give direction as to where we want to go. I think that's what you're looking for. I appreciate everything Mr. Goldstein says, but those are long-term goals that we can look at as a board. But for the immediate situation before us, which is next year, and all the work that has been done to really inform us of the, our challenges, I think we do need to take or give some direction. I think it's only fair to do that. So I agree with everything that has been said, but I'm going to go more for the granular on this. So I still have some questions about. Let's start off with the presentation from California Financial Service, School Services. So I noticed that you are working off the information based on our interim budget, which is probably
No, they were based on our
adopted budget in July 1st. I'm looking at the numbers, and it's $66 million. Okay, 66.3. And then I looked at the interim budget, Latanya, and I sent you an email last week or 2 weeks ago, actually 3 weeks ago, about why it was 68.8, I have that number right here in front of me somewhere, 68.6. That's a difference of $2 million in the up, higher than what they have in their numbers. So I need to really understand, again, I looked at the audit report and where we ended last year, and we over-projected expenditures, underestimated revenues. So that for me is very, very real. I'm assuming, based on the information, I went back 2 years, I'm assuming we're going to probably wind up in $2.7 million in the positive, just as we did last year. We didn't.
Remember, I said that last time we actually ended $1.5 million to the positive, but that million was textbooks, which we immediately put back into expenditures. So we really only ended $500,000 to the positive. And
okay.
then,
but I understand that. So if textbooks are not an issue this year, would it not be fair to say that we're going to wind up at 1.5 again?
I would be hoping that we would be.
Of course you're hoping for more, but just.
No. I'm hoping that I'm doing budgeting properly, and the 3 years that I've done your budget, we've ended very close to where we're supposed to be. So when I get closer to the second interim, I always revise that ending balance number and where we see we're going to be. But as we start getting into April and the end of April, first few weeks of May, I really adjust that ending balance number of where I think we're going to end. So last year, I felt like we hit that target. I was $500,000 off to the good, which is a good place to be. That million again in textbooks was an amount, and we just transferred it over. The 2 million that you're talking about, I'll have to find it in my first interim presentation. But when I did the first interim presentation, I know that I covered all the variances from adopted budget to first interim. And I expect changes from first interim to second interim. Just like I said, you've done reclasses, we have fifths of employees, you've approved several temporary teachers. That all of those are additional costs that you didn't have in your first interim budget. I mean, those are all the additional costs, and I told you I expect revenues to remain flat from first interim to second interim. So, but I do expect it to change. When you had asked me that, if it doesn't change, I'm not doing my job. That means I'm not looking at our revenues and our expenditures. So I do expect it to change.
Okay, so my point was going to be that based on the audit, on the actuals.
The audit actuals from 15-16.
15-16, and also from 14-15. There seems to be a pattern where we wind up with a 1.5, 1.7 differential. I
went through that last.
I actually called the auditor, and I did some research, and it checks out that it's $1.7 million in the positive. And what I'm saying is that if you're being asked to cut 4.8 million, and we have to look at all these scenarios, I have a problem with increasing class size. We did it this last year to 23. I don't think that it would be fair to increase class size again for that grade group, being that we went from, what was it, 20, or we went from 20 to 23? Or was it 19? 20. We went from 20 to 23. And that was really a big change for our district. And I don't think that, again, it would be fair to hit that group again with another class size increase. I just cannot do that again. So for me, that $600,000 is not something that I would consider. I asked some questions this morning. I looked at the electives at the middle school, and here's the question. Are all the electives at all 4K middle schools the same? Because I saw debate at our Rodeo, I think, and I didn't see that in any of the other schools. I looked at I made a list of them, so maybe that's something to look at. The reason I bring that up is because the enrollment was very low, but I saw everything from drama, debate, yearbook, intermediate art, STEM 7, digital media art, musical theater, choir, STEM 7-8, Spanish 1, Spanish 2, orchestra, beginning art, French, band, advanced band. So,
all of those except for debate, I think, are the same.
So they're all the same except for debate. Okay. So the classes, again, are very, very low. I think we have to figure out a way where, I'm not sure if it's an issue of where we're offering more sections and the sections are low, and where we could still possibly offer the classes, but maximize the enrollment in those classes to the cap so that we don't have small classes.
So debate at El Rodeo, that's why we're recommending a cut to middle school in English, unfortunately. And so that has already been
for English, but for
debate is one of the classes that teacher teaches.
I see. I didn't know that. Okay, so but the other classes are still low at the middle school as far as the actual electives, and so is there a way of maximizing the enrollment without offering or compromising, the offering of 3 sections, 2 sections in those classes, and just having 1 section, but filling that section all the way to 29 students instead of having 2 sections where we have 12 students. And I know that might require teachers traveling, but if we did that, maybe we could get teachers to travel to 2 schools instead of 4 schools. I think there would be some cost savings there. I also think that balance is important, and I talked about STEM earlier. I emailed you, Dr. Tedford. STEM was something that was just added to this district in the last 4 years, and we now have a requirement for STEM in 6th grade and 2 electives that are offered in 7th and 8th grade. So my idea is balance is important, and so we're not requiring students to take music. We're not requiring students to take Spanish or French or band. These are all electives, and so I look at STEM as an elective, and why is it that we're offering it, in 3 as a requirement in 6th grade? And that's fine if you want to keep it that way, but I think that it's only fair to continue to offer art or the music programs because it gives balance to our curriculum. And so it's an expense that wasn't there, as I said, 4 years ago to begin with. The expense only got bigger 3 years ago and bigger 2 years ago because we added and added and added. And so here we are. So for me, that would be an easy, and you know, I want to say that none of my kids are in the arts. None of my kids. So I don't have a kid that's interested, you know, I wish they were interested in the arts, but to be fair, they're more interested in the sciences. All three of my kids, I think, well, I don't know about the young one, but the two older ones for sure. So if I have to look at all this before we had STEM, I have to wonder, why are we investing so much in STEM? It makes sense on a lot of levels, but I think for balance, it would make so much more easy sense for me to eliminate one of those electives and one of those grades, or just not even offer as a required course in 6th grade, so that we have balance and that we can continue to offer the music programs, as Mr. Schwartz articulated. That's one area. Let's see here. I also think that the board should commit itself, if we're going to really look at cutting programs, I think I want to look at contract services and legal. We have to make a commitment, even if we said, look, let's reduce our legal costs by 10%, and let's stick to that. Let's adopt a budget. You know, I challenge the colleagues of my board here. Let's adopt a budget for legal. We don't operate. Right now, we just kind of spend on legal. That's how it's done in this district. I've talked to board members of water boards and from city council people, and they say that when they enter into an agreement with a law firm, it's a contract, and it's disclosed in public. Sure, if you wind up spending more than you need, then you go back and you augment that contract. But I think it keeps us in check. It keeps us as board in check as to, this is how much we have in this area, and we don't want to go over this amount. I think it's only fair that we do that. I'm appalled at how much we do spend legally. I'm not happy about it, and I think it's sloppy. And I will also say, without, you know, and I take responsibility. I'm on this board. So I'm not pointing the finger at anybody. We share this responsibility together. I think it's something that we can attain to. I think we could say, let's look at our bills, and let's go back to where we were 3 years ago. We had more students then than we do now, so why are we spending more? And I'm not talking about Metro, I'm not talking about Measure E, I'm simply talking about the general fund. We can find ways to reduce it. We spend more. I don't agree with your comments, I'm sorry, respectfully, that we spend less. We don't. I spoke to 3 other school districts. Everybody else is under $200,000. Just this last month, we spent $600,000, I think. No, I'm sorry, $600,000 is where we're at on an annual basis as of today, and the year's not even over. So I think those are, if we can reduce 10% of our contractual services in that area of the line item, I think that would be a savings to this district, a huge savings. 60,000, that's it? So then maybe 20%. 20% would be one. I think I'm giving you numbers. I want to get to where you need to be without impacting the classes. Intervention, I think that that's fair, reducing it by half. I hate to touch gate, but maybe there could be something done with collectively with all 4 schools after school and reduce our costs, where we're still thinking out of the box and offering something to the students who are engaged and need more enrichment. I think there is ways. I know other districts do it all the time. Counselors. I would first look at the K-8 counselors before I touch the high school counselors, because one of the complaints that I hear often from parents is, my daughter, my son has been waiting for their counselor to call them, and those counselors are heavily impacted with a lot of student cases, and so it's unfair to ask them to do the same amount of work and you know, produce the same results and have less. So I think if that helps you, I think I agree with Mr. Margot. I'm not sure if the survey will give you the results you want, but I think that we need to find a way to engage with the community, maybe going out and having town hall meetings at each of the 5 schools with management, PTA leadership. I think that is critical. I think it's very critical. But I want to say again, just looking at the scenario, and I have to look at the actuals. Would you not agree with me, Mr. Bennett? The actuals really tell a story. And to be conservative, I think, Mel might disagree with me, but I think that, you know, if we can buy some time in a year and go back and have this conversation with the district, with the community, I'm more interested in trying to see how we can move forward, and maybe it's 4 million instead of 800. I don't know. And that's it.
We can respond to that if you would like.
Yes, I would love
Or
that
we
to
can
be.
not. If you have
Could I just,
Sure.
Please,
little time left, and I have a few comments.
please.
First of all, let me say, I'm a process-oriented guy, and so I very, very much appreciate what we've done so far. Our first meeting a week ago, and then this meeting, I think we're on a path, and it's a good path. We have a tight deadline. If for example, we're going to reduce staff to react to our current overstaffing, we've got a tight schedule of 1 month. We have to bear that in mind. So with process in mind, let me make these comments. First of all, staff scenarios that we've been given so far don't really come close to our need to cut $5 million. And I can tell you that if we don't reduce our projected expenditures for next year, 2017-18, by $5 million, if we don't do that, if we're far below that, then we will be projecting a deficit next year, and in the 2 following years, which is part of our budget, a bigger projections, larger deficits, and I'm quite certain that LACO will not approve of that. They just won't approve of it. And they'll come back and say, hey, you've got to cut your expenditures to where you're not deficit spending. So and second, so that's one result of our not cutting $5 million. The second result is we'll be doing what we've been doing, and that is kicking the can down the road. And however much the amount that we don't reduce next year is going to be that much more of a burden for us the following year and the years after. So we have to bear that in mind. Here's where I am on this. Staff scenarios so far certainly don't cover all of our opportunities, don't include all of our opportunities, especially the opportunities that were brought up by school services. So I'm going to make this suggestion that that staff develop a target for modifying the current salary formula. A target that, in other words, if we do this, if we include benefits in the formula, which isn't now, how much will we save that way? How much will we reduce the deficit? That's important to know. We need to establish a target. Now, are we in a position unilaterally to accomplish that? Well, I don't know. Maybe we are. But I would hope that we would not have to unilaterally do that. I would hope that our union partners would understand and be flexible, understand the need. So that's one thing. With regard to the cost of special education, that is an area that I think most of us, if not all of us, are of the opinion that special education, that the program in our district, the special education program, can be more efficient. The point that Mr. Goldstein spent some time on discussing, I agree with him. But it's not enough, I think, just to say, well, you know, we should be more efficient. We don't have a head of special education right now, but I do believe that our current program could be looked at, and we could set some targets for efficiency, and you could tell the board, look, we believe we can save $1 million in special ed if we do these things. I think we need to do that. It's not on the plate right now. It needs to be on our plate. As far as the scenarios that staff has presented, I certainly support reducing staff to correct current overstaffing. But I must tell you that that's the only item that I find in these scenarios that I'm prepared to support right now. And the reason is this. I believe, and I believe with all my heart, that we can make the cuts we need to make and not impact our educational program. I will, at this point, I will not support cutting our educational program in any way. I won't support cutting the music program. I won't support I won't support cutting intervention as long as we need intervention. Hopefully in the future, we will not need an intervention program once we have strengthened our basic math and English language arts programs. We won't need an intervention program, but right now we need it. I think that the point that the issue that school services brought up, which is running 4 middle schools, I'm very much aware of the popularity of K-8 in this district. I'm very much aware of it. But I think that we should at least know what are the pros and cons of 4 middle schools. I actually don't think that they have been fully covered today. I'm not going to take the time now to suggest other pros and other cons, but there are. But I think that we should at least know what are our opportunities, what are the benefits and the cons of going from 4 middle schools to 1 middle school, and that should be part of our discussion. It needs to be. And I can tell you that I am convinced that there are ways to meet our objective of reducing our expenditures, our proposed expenditures for next year by $5 million and not impact our educational program. I'm convinced of it. So, as far as JPA, raising the JPA, I think that I'd like to admit that Mrs. Korbutov a few weeks ago requested that staff inform us of our costs associated with the JPA program. And I think it's very important to find that out as soon as possible, because one approach to the city. I must say that in response to Mr. Goldstein, I'm a little bit worried about telling the city that we want $25 million. I'm a little concerned about that approach.
I'm not.
I know that. But I'll tell you what I feel would be absolutely reasonable. The city says we are contributing $10 million in the JPA. And really and truly, there's certain costs associated with it. I don't know what those costs are. I don't know whether those costs are $2 million a year, or $1 million, or 3, or 4, or 5 million. But I think that the city needs to be told, look, city, you say that you're contributing 10 million, but you're really not contributing 10 million. You're contributing whatever it is, 6.
We need to come up with the net, and we really
We
really
need to do that.
We know
And-
that it's hot. We know that it's more than we think because we have staff. A good example was Monday, the holiday.
We need to know that. So
It's double time, and
that,
we're on staff for that.
that is an approach, Mr. Goldstein, that I think would be a very strong approach to the city, and I think it would be fruitful. So, staying once more with the process part of this whole thing, staff, I think we need to have more given to us for on our plate, as I've discussed, and I think we need to schedule another meeting when we will be able, the board will be able to see all these things, all these possibilities. And then I think the board will be in a position to make decisions, which we need to make. I don't know, and I can't tell staff. Can you be ready in another week? Can you be ready in another 10 days? I mean, but it seems to me we need to move in that direction. Thank you.
I wanted school services to speak that they have a hard out at 5, and you had asked them a question, so I want to give them an opportunity.
So I could take 2 minutes and answer some of these technical questions, but I'd prefer, if you're going to have another study session, that we do that research and that we help with that and do that in writing. I would like to answer the one question about do we look at the budgeted numbers and do we look at the reliability of the budget? Yes, we do. We look at the past, and what we try to do is we try to figure out whether or not we have explainable differences or unexplainable differences. And if we have explainable differences, then we rely on your current budgeted numbers. And we found that in the past years that we looked at, we could explain the differences. These budgets change all the time. My mother has 6 kids. If we all had checkbooks on her checking account, she would never know where she was, right? And that's what you have. You have all these spending units out there writing checks, so your budget changes all the time. But I am seldom impressed by the quality of education as demonstrated tonight, and I would like to make one comment. You and I, Mr. Spitz, have been around a long time. We've known each other a long time.
Very long.
We have met many business leaders, political leaders. I've met several presidents, senators, you know, all of those kinds of people. And I have rarely met anybody with the clarity of thought of Mr. Schwartz. And so, should adopt a resolution that while his mind is clear, his heart is pure, his thoughts are his own, we run him for higher office.
Because of jazz band.
Thank you very much. Staff, before we ask for comments from the audience, do you have any thoughts about our next step?
So I think it's, you know, there's 4 of us, that have a full-time job. I think it's really important to get as much common direction as we can get. I mean, there are really important things that were talked about tonight. They're just really timely. And it isn't just the four of us. It's very dependent on other people and getting that information. So I think that Mrs. Hacker put it best when she said, we need to get some direction. So if there is some common ground, that would help us when we go back.
Yeah, I was just going to suggest we could take one more.
Please.
Now. So anyways, Dr. Gregory, I do understand that preparing for the next school year starts March 15th, when the state sets the deadline to issue reduction in force notices. And I do agree that with Mr. Spitz that Dr. Gregory, along with our staff and our labor partners, need to see if they can come to an agreement in the next few weeks with regard to salaries and staffing. I think that really should be our primary objective in the next 2 weeks. As far as I'm concerned, everything that I discussed here today can be accomplished over the next 5 months, clearly by the end of this school year for implementation of the 2017-2018 school year. That's why we hired you. So that's what we're, as far as I'm concerned, that's what we should be looking for. But in the short term, I think salaries and staffing should be the objective of staff moving forward.
Thank you.
Well, I had asked questions of staff, and I can't really move forward with any of these scenarios until I get some of those questions answered a little more. There were informations on the effect of the reductions, the intervention, the effect on intervention, the effect on the 4 technology classes, how that would play out. It's easy to put it on here as a menu item. There's other things here that I don't think I'd have a problem if we needed to cut, but they're minor, so I don't think it would be significant. What I was going to also ask, and I can't help myself, but school services no, they're gone now. Okay. But they had discussed looking at the models, and it said detail provided in a report about a standalone middle school, which I'm obviously against, and consolidating into 2 K-8s. What I'm curious about is, did they mean 2 K-5s and 2 K-8s?
That's what they meant.
Okay. So it sparked my curiosity, that suggestion, because I had written some notes down here, and I keep on saying this, and hopefully somebody's going to listen, but as we move through this construction phase of our district, it will be beneficial for us to consolidate something to easier get through the construction phase. So, hey, how are you? So I think it's important for us to know whether we can do it. I am not advocating for closing any schools. It's like a thing that can run under the screen. Embargo is not Chiron. Yeah. I'm wondering if through the construction, which could last another 5+ years as we move through the district, will it be beneficial to know if we can consolidate either a middle school program, a K-5 program? I'm thinking not the K-5 program, maybe consolidate middle school. How does that play into what school services has suggested? Is it feasible and is it beneficial? Because Matt spent a lot of time discussing, and hopefully people here at least heard him, that increasing population of a certain subset in our district, superintendent agrees, improves our educational experience for the students. So you can't hear that as a board member and say, don't do that, just because of the effect it might have in the community in the short term. The community may learn to love going to a model of 2 K-5s and 2 K-8s. It still makes us unique. Those middle school students are still still get that social environment with the K-5 students. It accomplishes everything we want. It may save us a lot of aggravation, and it may promote something even better and launch us into a more positive direction as a district. So I don't want to just skip over that when we come back and make all these decisions, because if it's something that can come back to us and say, hey, we can save millions doing it this way, in fact, we don't have to cut anything by doing it this way, we need to know. We just need to know that. I've always advocated, I want to know everything before I make a decision. That's something to know.
Thank you.
I won't repeat, just to go along. I agree with everything that's been said, and I think if we could look at maximizing, again, sections through enrollment and not cutting program, but cutting sections. So you're cutting quantity instead of quality. I think that it'll bring us, it'll really correct where we're at with our staffing, or some of it. It will begin to address where we're at with our enrollment. And if we could get the information that Mrs. Korbutov suggested we get from the city in regards to the JPA, I think that would be quickly. We need to do all these things very, very quickly because we have a March deadline.
And once again, just, I hope that I made myself clear, but I'd like to meet again, to have another study session when staff can add to the mix. Targets for modifying the salary formula, targets for reducing the cost of special ed, and also to be able to throw in so that we have that knowledge. What advantages could we have if we had one middle school rather than 4? I think it's just essential to know that. Whether we're moving that
Are we
direction or
talking
not.
2K, because 2 K8s and 2 K5s is different from 4 K5s
Very
and
different.
1 612.
Very
There are multiple options that we'll look at and
Yeah.
review. So
Fine.
it won't be just one. But if you would, allow us a time to debrief as a cabinet, and then I'll be in contact with you and Sam
Excellent.
from now on. And again, I apologize about that late notice. That I have information for you. We'll stay in contact so that you have as much notice as possible.
Dr. Bergen, sorry, if you do a survey, if that winds up happening, that may be a question that you add on the survey.
Right.
Of a configuration model for the district and see how people.
But I don't think a survey should go out based upon the scenarios, these scenarios,
No.
because it's not complete.
We wouldn't do that. We wouldn't do that.
Are there any comments or questions before we adjourn from the audience? Yes, please.
Hi, I've been asked to speak on behalf of BHEA, and we just ask that the district work with us and take the time to consult with us about what goes on going forward. We were a little surprised last week at some of the recommendations for cuts and things like that, and we'd just like to be a part of the conversation going forward, that we make these cuts in as minimal way as possible and as far away from the classroom as possible.
Yeah, we agree 100%.
May I just respond to that? We as a board only saw those recommendations because they worked on it till Sunday, I think, and we had the studies, so.
We were all sort of surprised last
Sunday,
week.
right? We got the information Monday, or they finished Sunday night, so we only saw it Monday. So we're also seeing it on we didn't come up with the recommendations, they've been working very hard, and I give them a lot of credit. This is very hard.
It is hard.
We're not taking any pleasure in this, none of us.
Right.
Whether, and it's a puzzle.
We
And I
understand.
understand, I got a lot of letters from parents today. I understand, I think we all understand, I think we hear you, and, I think we can all do this, as you said, we work together.
Any other comments? Yes, please.
I owe the school.
Former president of the school board, A.J. Wilman.
I owe the school district a great deal. My daughters graduated in 2001 and 2003. They both had an extraordinary education. They both went to MIT. When they went to MIT, we were getting 6, 8, 10 kids admitted to MIT. Now, I'll put my opinion out there. The middle schools were twice the size, and they were still the weakest part of the school district. Okay? There were a whole group of us who supplemented the math and science education of our kids. There were a group of us at Horace Mann and Beverly Vista that got together to supplement the math and science education of our middle school students, and that group of kids were the ones that got into MIT and Carnegie Mellon. So that's piece number one. Piece number two, when my daughter was interviewed at Carnegie Mellon and MIT, the most interesting part of the interview was with the athletic director. I believe the tiebreaker was that she was a soccer player and a tracker. Okay? They wanted to see a well-rounded student. So it's not just music that is important, it's track and field that's important. It puts the whole student together. Dr. Brady, you and I had a delightful meeting the other day. This is on you, with all due respect. My request for the board members is
really come down with a solid target for what you want the budget reduced by for next year, okay, and have a number that you agree on, hopefully 5-0, but it could be 3-2, and then Dr. Brady needs to come together with his cabinet and come forward with a set of proposals. You don't have time, excuse me, board members, but you don't have time to micromanage this, okay? You hired a superintendent to be your academic leader, and he needs to come forward with proposals that fit with the budgets that you guys put in place, because you have March 15th. You don't have time to work on this. Anyway,
Thank you,
I
AJ.
appreciate your time.
The meeting is adjourned.